She looked at me with a firmness I'd never seen before and whispered, "This is forbidden." But in that moment, with her eyes locked on mine, I realized something dangerous. Forbidden things often feel the most right. I still remember the moment I first noticed her, not as my teacher, not as the woman who stood at the front of the classroom with carefully prepared notes, but as a person. It was late in the afternoon, long after most students had left. The hallways had grown quiet, and only the soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. I had stayed behind, struggling over an assignment I couldn't quite piece together. She walked past my desk, pausing when she saw the half-finished work spread across the pages. "Still here?" she asked, her voice carrying both warmth and curiosity. I nodded, trying not to sound as frustrated as I felt. She leaned closer, her presence immediately changing the atmosphere around me. The faintest trace of her perfume, subtle, elegant, something floral but grounded, drifted toward me. It was the kind of scent that lingered softly, never overwhelming, but impossible not to notice once you did. She pulled up a chair beside me, sliding effortlessly into the space that had been empty moments before. Suddenly, the desk felt too small, the air too still. My focus wasn't on the assignment anymore, it was on the quiet steadiness in her eyes, the way a single strand of hair slipped forward as she tilted her head to look at my notes. Her fingers brushed the edge of my notebook as she pointed something out. Just a simple gesture, yet I felt it echo in my chest. Her touch wasn't even on my skin, but close enough that the warmth of her presence settled into me. I tried to pay attention to her explanation, but my mind betrayed me. I wasn't just listening to the words, I was listening to her. The cadence of her voice, measured yet soft. The way she spoke as if the world had slowed down, as though this moment was more important than the time ticking away outside the classroom. And then something unexpected happened. She looked up at me, catching me in the middle of watching her instead of my paper. It wasn't a sharp, disciplinary look. It was softer, as if she, too, realized there was something unusual about sitting there together after hours. I quickly dropped my gaze, embarrassed, but the silence between us carried a weight I couldn't explain. For the first time, I saw her not just as my teacher, but as a woman, confident, graceful, and yet carrying something quietly vulnerable in the depth of her expression. And though I didn't dare name it then, that was the moment the first spark lit inside me. The following week, I found myself lingering again, this time on purpose. I told myself it was because I needed clarity on another assignment, but deep down, I knew it was because of her. Something about that late afternoon quiet with her had stayed with me, replaying in my thoughts more often than I cared to admit. She was gathering papers into a neat stack when I approached. Her eyes lifted briefly, and there it was, that small, polite smile she always gave her students. But when I asked if she had a moment, the smile softened into something else. Something almost personal. We sat across from each other in the dimly lit classroom, the golden slant of the setting sun spilling across the desks. For a while, the conversation stayed safely on the assignment. But as minutes passed, it drifted into life outside the classroom. She asked me what I planned to do after finishing school, what dreams kept me up at night. I told her honestly, things I hadn't really admitted out loud before. She listened intently, her chin resting lightly against her hand, eyes focused on me as though my words actually mattered. That intensity unsettled me in a way I couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't the attention of a teacher checking in, it was the attention of someone seeing me, really seeing me. And I think she felt it too, because her composure faltered for just a moment. She drew in a slow breath, straightened her posture, and then said softly, "You know this kind of familiarity isn't really appropriate. I'm your teacher." The words were firm, but the way she spoke them, gentle, almost reluctant, betrayed her. She wasn't scolding me. She was warning herself as much as me. I nodded, pretending to accept it without question, but inside, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Her setting that boundary didn't make me back away, it made me notice the invisible line between us, sharp and undeniable. A line neither of us was supposed to cross, but one that already felt fragile. As she closed her folder, her gaze lingered on mine just a second too long. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to add something, but she caught herself. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest, a small protective gesture, yet her eyes betrayed her. They weren't cold, or distant, they were conflicted. That brief silence hung heavy between us. And though neither of us said it, I felt it with absolute clarity. She wasn't just reminding me of the rules. She was reminding herself of the danger and how natural it felt to break them. After that conversation, I tried to convince myself to keep things simple. She had drawn the boundary clearly, and I respected her for it. But even respect can't stop the mind from noticing what it notices, or the heart from lingering where it shouldn't. In the days that followed, I caught myself watching her in ways I never had before. Not inappropriately, not with anything bold or reckless, but with the kind of attention you give to details you want to memorize. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear whenever she grew focused. How her smile always appeared first in her eyes before reaching her lips. The quiet sigh she'd release when she thought no one was paying attention, an exhale that seemed to carry more than simple exhaustion. It was in these little things that I began to realize she wasn't untouchable. She wasn't just my teacher. She was human, graceful, yes, but also quietly vulnerable in ways she never admitted out loud. And the strange thing was, I think she began to notice me noticing. One afternoon, she handed back an essay I'd written. As she slid the paper across my desk, her fingers brushed against mine. It was nothing more than a fleeting graze, but my skin came alive as though a spark had leapt between us. I looked up, startled, and for just a heartbeat, she froze too. Her lips parted as though she might apologize, but then she simply moved on, her composure quickly returning. Still, I saw the hesitation. That split-second delay before she withdrew her hand, as if she had felt the same charge I had but refused to name it. From that moment, something subtle shifted between us. The air grew heavier whenever we were near each other. Our conversations became more careful, our silences more telling. I found myself listening less to what she said and more to what she didn't. The pauses in her sentences, the way her gaze lingered on me just a second too long before flickering away. I wondered if she sensed the same pull I did, that invisible thread tightening between us, day by day. It wasn't something we could speak about, not in words. But the unspoken was louder than anything either of us dared say. And it weighed on me, growing heavier with every passing glance, every accidental brush of closeness. Because the more I noticed her, the more impossible it became to go back to seeing her as just my teacher. It happened on a rainy evening, one of those days when the sky feels heavy and the world slows down. I had stayed late again, and so had she. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the classroom, muffling the silence that usually felt too sharp between us. She was carrying a stack of books toward her desk, her movements slower than usual. I noticed the faint strain in her shoulders, the tired curve of her posture. Without thinking, I stood up and offered to help. She hesitated, but then, almost with relief, let me take part of the load from her arms. Our fingers touched briefly in the exchange. The books were cool and heavy in my hands, but the warmth from her skin lingered longer than it should have. She gave a small, almost weary smile. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice softer than I was used to hearing. We placed the books down, and for a moment she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the neat piles as though they held more weight than paper should. I saw the way her jaw tightened, the slight tremble in her breath. And in that quiet moment, I realized she wasn't just a teacher holding everything together with authority and poise. She was a woman carrying burdens that no one else seemed to notice. "You seem tired," I said carefully. It wasn't the kind of thing students usually told their teachers, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. She laughed softly, a sound that was more fragile than amused. "I suppose I am. Some days, it feels like there's never enough of me to give." Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, but enough for me to hear it. I didn't know what to say. All I could do was reach out, gently laying my hand on her arm. Her blouse was thin, and the warmth of her skin radiated through it. For a second, I thought she might step back, remind me of boundaries. But she didn't. She stayed there, her eyes flickering down to where my hand rested, then up to meet mine again. Her shoulders relaxed, just a little. Her exhale was long and unguarded, as though she had been holding it in all day. That small moment of contact, as simple as it was, seemed to loosen something inside her. It wasn't romantic yet, not in words or in promises. But it was intimacy. Quiet, undeniable intimacy, the kind that slips through the cracks when walls begin to weaken. And in that closeness, I realized, the line between us was blurring, whether either of us admitted it or not. It was late again, though this time neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. The rain from earlier had stopped, but the world outside remained hushed, as though the night itself was holding its breath. Only the warm glow of the desk lamp lit her office, casting shadows across the shelves lined with books and papers. I sat across from her, but not far enough. Our chairs were pulled close together, our knees nearly brushing beneath the desk. At first, it was accidental. Space was limited, and we told ourselves it didn't matter. But neither of us moved. She was explaining something, her voice steady, though softer than usual. I tried to focus on her words, but every detail about her presence pulled me elsewhere, the way the lamplight softened her features, the way her hair slipped loose from its usual careful style, the way her lips curved slightly as she spoke, as if holding back thoughts she'd never say aloud. Then, as I leaned forward to make a note, my knee brushed hers. Just the lightest touch, but it was enough to send a pulse of heat through me. I froze, ready to apologize, but she didn't move. Her eyes flickered down for a split second before returning to mine, her expression unreadable. The silence that followed was louder than anything we could have said. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, the quiet rustle of pages shifting in the still air. My own heartbeat pounded in my chest, each beat reminding me how close we were, how fragile the space between us had become. Her hand rested on the desk, fingers tapping absent-mindedly. Without realizing it, mine drifted closer. Not to touch, at least, not deliberately, but close enough that the warmth of her skin reached me. Close enough that the distance was unbearable. For a moment, her breath hitched, and she turned her face slightly away, as though the nearness was too much to endure. Yet she didn't pull back. She stayed, caught in the same suspended moment I was. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even a touch. But it was something more dangerous, more powerful. It was the kind of nearness that said everything words could not, the pull of something forbidden, undeniable, and far too easy to fall into. In that small, lamplit room, the world outside ceased to exist. And in the silence between us, I realized, it wasn't about whether this should happen. It was about how impossible it had become to resist. The silence in her office stretched, heavy and unbroken. My knee still brushed hers beneath the desk, and though the contact was slight, it felt like a secret the world wasn't supposed to know. She shifted, finally pulling back just enough to create space, but the look in her eyes told me what words hadn't yet been spoken. She felt it too. She closed the book she'd been using as a shield and pressed her palms flat against its cover. Her fingers trembled slightly, and when she spoke, her voice was low, unsteady. This can't happen. You know that, don't you? I swallowed, unsure how to answer. The part of me raised to respect authority wanted to nod, to agree, to pretend nothing had been building between us. But the weight of the past weeks, every lingering glance, every accidental touch, every silence that said more than words ever could, made that impossible. Her eyes flickered to mine again, and in them I saw the conflict tearing her apart. There was fear there, yes, but also longing. A longing so deep it almost hurt to witness. She leaned back in her chair, her arms folding across her chest as though trying to protect herself from her own feelings. It's forbidden, she whispered again, this time with more certainty, though her voice trembled as she said it. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk, closing the space she tried to create. My voice came out softer than I expected, almost a confession in itself. That's why it feels right. Her breath caught. The words hung between us, dangerous and undeniable. She shook her head, but the motion lacked conviction. You don't understand the risks, she began, but her words faltered as my hand slowly moved toward hers. I didn't grab it. I didn't force anything. I simply placed my palm close enough that if she wanted to pull away, she could. But she didn't. Her fingers trembled before finally settling into mine, her touch tentative but real. The moment our hands met, the room seemed to exhale with us. The world outside, the rules, the expectations, the judgments, faded. All that remained was the quiet truth of two people drawn together despite everything. She looked at me then, her eyes shimmering with vulnerability, her lips parting as though to speak again. But no words came. And in that silence, I understood, sometimes what's forbidden isn't wrong. Sometimes it's simply too powerful to ignore. Her hand lingered in mine, trembling at first, then slowly stilling as though she had finally allowed herself to breathe. The forbidden edge of the moment pressed heavily around us, yet what I felt wasn't reckless desire, it was something deeper, quieter, steadier. She looked at me, her eyes filled with questions she didn't dare speak. Would this ruin everything? Was it selfish? Was it wrong? The uncertainty flickered across her face like shadows in the lamplight. But then she exhaled, and in that breath, something softened. I squeezed her hand gently, as if to tell her without words, we don't have to decide everything tonight. And somehow, she seemed to understand. Instead of pulling away, she rose from her chair and moved toward me. The shift was hesitant, cautious, as though every step was a battle between fear and longing. When she finally stopped in front of me, there was no distance left to pretend. Her arms lifted slowly, almost unsure, then slipped around my shoulders. The embrace was tentative at first, fragile, but as I wrapped my arms around her, it deepened. She pressed her cheek lightly against my chest, and I felt it, the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat, the rhythm syncing with mine in the silence. It wasn't passion that defined that moment. It was surrender. Not to recklessness, but to trust. To the safety of finally being seen, and to the comfort of being held. I closed my eyes, resting my chin lightly against her hair. The faint scent of her perfume, now so familiar, surrounded me. My hand traced the line of her back in the gentlest motion, not pulling her closer, but promising I wasn't letting go. When she finally spoke, her voice was muffled against me. I don't know where this leads, but I can't pretend I don't feel it. I tightened my hold just slightly, answering in the only way that felt true. Then we don't pretend. We take it slow. We let it be real, without rushing into what it doesn't need to be. She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes shimmering with both fear and relief. A small smile curved at her lips, faint, but honest. And in that dimly lit office, with the world outside still holding its breath, we chose not to cross the line recklessly. We chose to stand together at its edge, acknowledging the truth between us. Not forbidden. Not wrong. Just real. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you felt while listening. And if you want more slow burn age gap romances like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of love.